So, you may know Ed Gein for many a reason. If you're a horror fan, you probably know him for his, I guess, influence on many horror films. And I guess, maybe if you're just into serial killers, you know him for what he's done. And if not, you just may know the name, but may not know much about him. And I guess this is kind of a documentary type series that's going to fill you in on that. Um, I'll read here the IMDb plot, but it's not really specific to this since this is a series that's covered different people. It's an anthology series about high profile crimes or killers that captured public attention or notoriety. Again, on Netflix. So I did not see, again, it's part one or two. And, but, I don't know why. I guess I just kind of missed it. I think I've seen it flash there on Netflix, when I'm on it. But I don't know why I just never took the time to watch it. And, I think I saw this one mostly because I ended up sharing it so much. It was just coming through my feed all the time, these green posters and so forth. Once I shared it X amount of time, I'm like, I just like, okay, I'm just going to go ahead and watch this because why not? I've shared this enough. Let's see what this is. So I really can't compare how this one is done versus the first two. I think the first one was Jeffrey Dahmer and the second one was the two Hernandez brothers. I know my wife watched that one about the two brothers and she said it was really good. So that's her quick review of it. I don't know. I don't have too much interest in their story, even though lots of people are. I will hopefully at one point go back and watch the Jeffrey Dahmer one now that I've kind of seen this one and how they did this. But anyway, again, this is the focus here is on Ed Gein, and I will say that they are going to do a part 4 to the series, and I believe it's Lizzie Borden. So obviously, they kind of have a theme in what they're going with here, and we'll see where that goes. Anyway, as far as this one, again, this is a series, and I should have looked before. I don't know exactly how many episodes. It was like 8 or 10 episodes or so. And, it covers a portion of Ed Gein's life, kind of giving you a little bit of an introduction to him and then an interesting take here or there on him. So I really, because it's kind of a documentary, even though, it's not, it's kind of just covering his life. I don't really think there's anything to spoil or not spoil here, so I'm not really going to say spoiler alert or not. But, we'll just discuss, certain things. I did find it interesting as as I went through it and got towards the end. There were certain things that I Googled. I'm like, is that really true or false about him or whatever? And, I guess it depends on the source and whatever. To the extent, especially, when I Googled, like, who did he really kill and who did he not? Or I guess it's versus who you think he really killed or not versus who he was really charged with killing and who he's not. So, I think, early on, you kind of get his relationship with his mom. I guess that's the big point they're going. And his relationship at home. I think, it's with his brother. He also has a brother there. So, you really get that. One of the things I also Googled is the character here is very, soft-spoken. Like he has this, very, low tone of voice or different tone of voice. And it's not what you would expect as a serial killer. I mean, if you probably took 5 different voices of 5 different killers and you put them up and you put his there and you said, okay, which one is obviously the killer and which one is not, unless you were trying to do the whole flip the thing where, I'm going to go with the least one and say that he's the killer just because, I don't think you would have guessed him as being a serial killer just based on his voice alone and the way he speaks. Obviously, they painted him as I don't want to offend nobody, but I don't know the appropriate term, I guess maybe just a little bit, slower mentally or whatever, for whatever reason. If they said specifically, well, I missed it. I don't know, but obviously they paint him as just, just being maybe a little bit slower and very soft spoken and just having a different view of things, and maybe not so quick to catch on to things and just different. So maybe some thing here or there that maybe would tip you off, especially I think obviously the mother issue is a big thing for him, and so forth. So they kind of explore that. Yeah, there's horror in this. You are going to see some moments of kills and so forth. They're not going to shy away from that. But if you're really thinking that they're going into this and really going heavy on that, and that you're going to see blood and guts, and Ed Gein's a wild killer, and they're just going to show episode after episode of him just killing people and killing people, that's not really so. Like I said, they are going to have those moments. He is going to kill people. You are going to see that. But the whole thing is not that. It is definitely a venture in the psychological of him, putting him in situations, seeing what he goes through, what he kind of thinks. He's attached to some girl that he really likes, and as it goes on, he really wants a relationship with, but she doesn't see him in that way. She has her kind of own aspirations and thoughts and so forth, and she's in a way kind of using him. She's not really a serial killer per se, but she definitely has interest in that, and and you kind of see maybe a slight twisted form of her too, and she definitely aspires to be, I think it's a reporter or something like that, or a photographer, and almost kind of uses him in a way to kind of get certain things from him and so forth. There is some scenes where at least from when I was watching, I wasn't sure whether she was really partaking in it or not, or if he was just almost like a dream sequence or not. So really wasn't sure. And then so of course that was something else I googled, like how much was did Ed Gein have this other woman in his life, and did she participate really in what he was doing? And I guess that's just a question of still a question. There's really, I don't think she was ever charged, if I remember what I read correctly. And I guess so you don't know whether those things really happened with her or not. So he has that going on as well. So it obviously covers different parts of his life. Obviously I said, obviously not really as a kid. I think you may have seen some flashbacks, but not really as a kid, but mostly as an adult with his mom, and then those issues will reoccur throughout. And then obviously when she's gone, and then some of the things he has with this girl that he likes, and then later on when he eventually gets caught and then sent to a psych ward, asylum, or whatever you want to call it, and then his life there, and how that kind of finished off. So and that was another thing I googled, like how he ended his life and so forth, as that as well. So you learn maybe what was wrong with him or not at the end of the day. But definitely very interesting stuff, and I think probably as a horror fan, if you're just not interested, maybe him as a killer, or maybe you're not interested in the serial killers per se, but you're a horror fan, I definitely think that this is something to watch. Especially there's specific episodes that kind of show his influence on horror and where some of the famous horror films got ideas from based on him. And, they kind of do this very interesting thing where they kind of just blend into diving into these other movies, per se, Psycho, and the shower scene, and other things to do with Mother, which, as I said, was where, Ed Gein's story, kind of starts with issues with his mother, and then, whether or not he, dug her up or not, or dug other people up or not, or even slept with corpses or not. Um, so if you're really a horror fan, I think, they definitely, and maybe you're a horror fan, but you don't maybe realize some of that stuff. I never knew that some of that stuff came from him. Originally it was like, at a certain point, of watching horror movies or whatever, then and digging into things, then you realize, oh, okay, well, these things came from certain things, and certain movies came from serial killers, and in this case, Psycho is one of these movies that kind of came from Ed Gein, or at least part of the ideas there. So, they blend themselves, later on into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's another one. So, I thought from a horror perspective, that was very interesting how they did that. I thought, maybe they spent a touch too much time there. And especially with Hitchcock and so forth, they kind of then took a weird focus on him and I guess him and how he saw everything going on with how they were doing Psycho and audience reaction and whatever. So, I thought obviously making that point was important, but I thought especially in that maybe they, I don't know, kind of maybe strayed off a little touch much. And specifically with Hitchcock, I don't know why. To me, it just seemed like it. Or maybe it was just because it was the first one they did, and then once you get to the others, it's okay. But I definitely think, it's an interesting perspective. And again, if you're a horror fan, to kind of see, that incorporation there of, okay, here's Ed Gein, and here's, very popular horror movies that are important to the horror community and horror in general, and how those two, the real world comes with the fake world and so forth, the movie world, and how they created, something so that basically terrified people in many ways. So that was definitely interesting. So it has its ups and downs. I think there are times, again, if you're thinking that they're just going to show him murder and murder and murder, it's not that. You have to sit through weird conversations with him and weird interactions with him and other characters. And even when he gets to the hospital, there's some good stuff there too, but there's other times where, it's just weird. But again, they're trying to give you perspective. So you just kind of, even though it's weird and maybe not what you want to see, or maybe even slow at times, I think, you just have to really think of it as, we're not here to just see him butcher people. We, if we wanted to see that, we watch The Shining, or not The Shining, the Psycho again, and you can watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and see that element of it. You're here to mostly to kind of see him and see, what he thinks and the psychological aspect of him. So I thought, that if you kind of go in with that, I think you enjoy it a little bit more. So overall, I liked it, and definitely since it made me Google stuff, I think, it got what I wanted. It got me curious. It got me wanting to know, true and false of Ed Gein. So that was interesting. So with that, it's kind of hard to grade it, but I think I'm going to give it 3 pools of blood. And that's not, comparison to, like I said, I didn't see either of the two other, series that they did in this monster universe that they have. This very independent just on this. So I'm going to give it 3 pools of blood. I had some interesting stuff and interesting takes on how they did it. And the focus on the horror world and so forth. So, I think if, you're interested in it again, like I said, you're a horror fan, it might pique your interest to kind of take a look at this. If maybe you didn't want to watch the whole thing, maybe the episodes that kind of cover, some of the horror stuff, maybe that will be of interest to you if you don't want to watch, every single moment of it. So with that, horrorsgoryreviews.blogspot.com is where you can find all of my reviews, written and video. Certainly tons of video reviews for a while now, so you can like, subscribe, and do everything else that everybody wants you to do. If not, no worries, it is okay. I thank you for your time regardless. Twitter, Facebook information down below as well, so you can join me there, talk about this series. Maybe if you saw the other series and recommend them, please let me know. And definitely in the comment section as well, your thoughts on this, and did you learn anything from this, or did you know most of the information and just find it really not interesting? It could go that way. So with that, I'll catch you in the next review, horror fans.